Hello, everybody. Good evening. How's it going? I'm very well. I just back from the Jane Austen Festival. I don't know if I told you about it the last time. I had a lot of fun. It was beautiful. I loved it. And now we are back in Milan doing my live about Harry. So probably you already know that, but I'll say anyway. It's about Harry. It's a fanfiction I wrote about Harry Potter's adulthood. So I'll try to start kind of straight away because doing the Italian version, I realized that those three chapters I'm about to read they are quite long, so it might take some time for me to read it. Ciao, hello Marco. Hi Marco. It will take some time for me to read it, and it's better to start straight away so we don't lose time. And yeah, I just need to inform you, as I said before, that I'm considering to change platform for my live, and I'll probably go on Twitch. I'm not sure. It's gonna be only for the English one, and I'll post anyway all the video on YouTube afterward. I'm still deciding, and I guess I'm going to take a decision up to the next week, I guess, because we are getting to the end, and the next week is gonna be the last two chapters of this book, of the fourth book. So yeah, probably the next week I'll take a decision about that. And what else should I say? Yeah, as I said, we have got these three chapters with a nice plot twist, and then next week we'll get to the end. Probably we should just refresh our mind on where we left. And we left, let me see. Oh yeah, so basically Ron is out of Azkaban, but pretty quickly everybody realized that it hasn't been too wise, despite the situation, to let him out, because obviously he has killed Harry Potter's daughter, and Harry Potter is super super famous and loved by the magical community, and now consequently everybody hates Ron. And yeah, Hermione and Ron had been subjected to vandalism, and yeah, they basically had to flee. And Ginny really wanted Harry to find a solution, and the only solution he found has been to write to Charlie, which is in Romania, asking him to convince Ron to move there, which he agreed. So he and Hermione are about to leave. Ron already left. Hermione is about to leave very soon. And yeah, Harry is pretty cast down about that because obviously in the last few months he lost both his best friends. So yeah, we left him there, and I guess without further ado, we can carry on with chapter 28, which is called Won't You Feel Lonely? Harry didn't need to inform Ginny about the news. By the evening, she knew already, from Hermione's parents to the Barrow to her. She was greatly agitated. What do you think about it? She asked, while with a flick of her wand, a knife started to chop potatoes. I think it's a great idea, he answered while perusing the Daily Prophet. Not much about him, thankfully, and a lot about some house elf strike. He made a mental note to show it to Hermione the next day at work. He then remembered, though, that it was just 1 month, and then she would be gone. The mornings and evenings were always the worst for him. Lily's absence was felt the most. It seemed like the echo of their steps could be heard through the house, as empty as it sounds. I suppose so, I wonder how Charlie came out with it, Ginny mumbled in meditation, while with another flick a spoon started to stir the gravy in the saucepan. Harry closed the newspaper, laying it aside. I wrote to Charlie, and I explained the situation. I asked him to persuade Ron to move there, he admitted frankly. She almost let her one drop. You what? Why didn't you tell me? She exclaimed in surprise. I didn't want to say, in case it would end up in nothing, he answered. I thought it might turn out to be the best solution for them. The only way for Ron and Ugo to get over the whole thing. And you know Ron, he always welcomes novelty. He was so bored at at the joke shop. I was sure he would have liked the idea. Ginny sat on a chair, close to him, transfixed. But what about Hermione? Surely she doesn't want to go. She likes her job. I know, but they would have been very miserable here. She's smart. She will find something she likes there too, he said, stopping the knife and turning down the fire under the saucepan with his wand to save the dinner. Ginny was still gaping at him. But won't you miss her? You are always together. You basically have always some business at work with her, and the lunch breaks and going to the ministry together. Of course, I'll miss her, but I couldn't think to anything else to help them, he said, while transferring the potatoes and the chicken in the oven. She was silent for a couple of minutes, pondering over it, and then she asked, who's going to take her place at the ministry? Harry, trying to hide a smile, took up the newspaper again nonchalantly to hide his face. It's between a guy called Richard something and the shag offerer, who is called, by the way, Helena. And before she could open her mouth to retort, he added in haste, I didn't check, Hermione told me, unasked. It's going to be the guy, she affirmed confident. Oh yeah? How'd you know? Asked Harry, smiling openly now. I'm writing to Hermione tomorrow, first thing I do when I get to the office, she said, standing up to take plates and cutlery. She says that she's not the one who chooses, Harry answered, pretending to read the newspaper while very much amused in teasing her. Oh, she will choose all right, she exclaimed, setting up the table with violence. And then she realized that out of habit she had put 3 plates on the table, one each for them, and one where Lily used to sit. She faltered, her expression sobering. She took the extra plate and stored it back in the cupboard, halting there, immobile, her gaze lost. Harry stood up, reaching her behind. He shifted her hair and kissed her tenderly on the neck. She turned, leaning her head on his chest. If I turn this Helena in a Todd, perhaps I'll feel better, she joked to turn away melancholy. Harry chuckled. You don't need to. She's already a toad to me compared to you. The following evening, the Weasley plus wives were all meeting at the Barrow to say goodbye to Ron. They were having they were having dinner together. While Ginny was brushing her hair, she asked Harry for the third time in the space of 2 hours, Are you sure you don't want to come? Dead sure, he answered for the third time. Won't you feel lonely here? She asked for the second time. Yes, very much. It's gonna be awful, but in any case, better than seeing Ron. I'll be alright, he lied for the second time. Mom will be disappointed, she said, frowning. Second time. I'm sure she will understand. It's gonna be much better without me. Second time, he said, sitting on the bed, observing her slight and long fingers braid her hair. I disagree. It won't be better for me, she said, wearing her coat and pecking him on the lips. First time. Nice. Go, or you'll be late, he urged her. As soon as she was disappearing in the greenish flame in the kitchen, the house seemed even emptier than usual. The silence was absolute and deafening. He started to reflect on how much his life had changed in a space of barely few weeks. First Lily, then Ron, and now Hermione. Some of the most important people in his life were gone or about to go, and a series of desolating days were waiting in front of him before the boys would be back for summer holidays to fill the house again. But even then, it would have been still incomplete. Lily's void could not be filled. He wondered how James and Albus were coping. They already got a letter from each. They were filled with their day to day events. Nothing about Lily, which wasn't surprising anyway. It is not something that a boy and a teenager would put in a letter. If they were grieving, it was in their inside. They were growing up fast, especially James, who was already in his third Hogwarts years. Every holiday, he was a bit different, taller, and less child looking. Just a few years back, Albus was still asking for cuddles and hugging them spontaneously very often. Now, it wasn't the case any longer. Harry was proud to see them growing, but he missed them being children. That's why he was happy to have Lily at home. Harry had experienced their childhood in a completely different way compared to James and Albus. He and Ginny were more mature when they had her, even if they didn't show any maturity at the time of conception. She had been a surprise. They weren't looking for another baby. She was the product of one of the few nights out they could get. The children were at the Burrow. Molly and Arthur were having them for a weekend to give them some time alone. They had decided to go to a Muggle party in London. They were going to these kind of events when they had the chance. It was easier for Harry to enjoy himself among muggles, and it was always an exciting experience for Ginny, not so used to all the technology involved. They got home completely wasted, and the morning after, they could barely remember to have had sex at all. Harry remembered the hangover very well, though. One of the worst. When Ginny, about 2 months later, had realized to be pregnant, they weren't overjoyed. To be completely honest, they were on the verge of tears. Albus and James had just started to be less challenging, more self sufficient, and the thought to start all over again, especially for Ginny, hadn't been welcomed with enthusiasm at first. Harry started to feel excited only when he found out it was going to be a girl. He had always wanted a girl. He was very curious to see how different he was going to be, and it had been different. They created a very strong bond straight away. Being summer, he had a whole month to help Ginny out. It hadn't been an easy delivery, and it was he who mostly took care of Lily in the first month. He would give her the bottle, change her nappies, wake up during the night when she was crying, so Ginny could get the rest she needed. It had been difficult when September came to return to work, but the bond was created, and it just grew stronger. As soon as she could speak, and people would ask her idiotic question that sooner or later is always asked to any child, do you prefer mommy or daddy? She would always answer daddy, without hesitation. He pretended not to be affected by it, while inside, his heart melted every time. When he started to grow up, he had done things he would never have thought to do in his life. Shopping for pink glittering things, playing with dolls, going to birthday parties where he had the chance to find out that girls can be much more challenging than boys. Tittering, asking embarrassing questions just for the fun of seeing you embarrassed, bickering. He had found himself in great difficulty in handling the situation a couple of times. Between mothers, which acted exactly the same as the girls, and daughters, he didn't know what was worse. In the end, he had left this task to Ginny. It was more than he could bear. He felt much more at ease with boys' birthday parties, where with the broom, or a ball, depending on the context, they were all happy and busy. He had been intrigued about the future that was waiting for her. He had amused himself in thinking what kind of girl she would grow up to be, his reaction to her forced boyfriend, and so on. He still hadn't absorbed completely the fact that she wasn't there anymore. He wouldn't stop to think about it to protect himself. He hadn't approached her room. He was there all the time, in the corner of his eyes. His gaze was continually caught by it, clenching his heart in an iron grip. The impossible wish to find her pet there, sleeping or playing, was never leaving him. He had to restrain his mind many times not to indulge in that treacherous hope. Once before, he had been attracted by a promise of something unreal with the mirror of her eyes. Watching his parents in the reflection, he had longed for them, longed for a family he never had, for the idea of it. But now he was more dangerous. He craved for something that he had and lost. He must find the strength to confront it. Alone this time, no Dumbledore helping him in accomplish this dire task. He decided to do it that night. He wasn't sure about his possible reaction, and it was better to find it out unaccompanied. He pushed the door and got inside. Everything was how it had been left on Christmas Day. Clothes were on the floor, and toys and Christmas presents were lying all over. He started to tidy up. He put the clothes on the hangers and in the wardrobe, the toys in the toy box. When picking up a rubbish plush that had fallen on the floor, he realized how silly this tidying up was. He had done it instinctively without reflecting on it. He sat on the bed and placed the plush against the pillow. On the side table was lying Lily's toy wand and the calendar she was using to cross out the days to Christmas. Funny how it had all a different meaning now that the last cross was the day she died. It was all covered by a layer of dust. There you go, he said to take it off. There wasn't much on it beside the crosses, but when he looked at July, his heart sank. On the 34th of July, she had drawn in a heart. Dad, dead, she had written with her uneven calligraphy. And just besides, on the 30th of July, another heart, Lily, for her birthday. It took his breath away. This was not a good idea at all. Why am I inflicting this to myself? He stood up and left the room, as sorrow was starting to flow in his head unstoppable. From now on, neither Christmas nor his birthday, not even any other day of his life, would be enjoyable any longer. How can I stop this? This is never going to leave me, he thought desperately. That pain would always be there, lying on the bottom of him. He would eventually stop to be so violent, but it would always be there, nevertheless, ready to awake any moment. How can anybody live this way? You have done it in the past. You can do it now. It's only more difficult. I just can't. I haven't got the strength. He let himself fall on his bed, wishing that Ginny would be back soon. It was a torture to be home alone with his own thoughts. He couldn't bear to stay there with all this going through his head. He needed to shake it off somehow. He needed to do something to chase away these unhealthy thoughts. And in the spur of the moment, he had an idea. I'm going for a ride. It was a long time he didn't touch a broom, and now it was the perfect moment for it. The night was dark, and he could use the window on the back of the house. He got his broom from the cupboard. It was a very good one, bought recently, but between job, kids, and being in London, he had scarcely used it. Getting ready, he was reminded about his firebolt lost so many years before when he and the other 7 Harrys had been pursued by a Death Eater and Voldemort. He never went to look for it. He had not the remotest idea where it could have fallen, and they were so high in the air that it probably has smashed somewhere on the ground below. He was reminded of the day he got it. Ron, gaping face, and Hermione's doubts. He felt nostalgia for those times. It was just before things started to go downfall, when he still was a careless kid. He wasn't that much afraid of Sirius Black wanting to kill him. His youth was protecting him from real worries, and his life seemed positively carefree and fun comparing to the following years. Harry wished he could return a 13-year-old boy, playing Quidditch and joking with Hermione and Ron. He had definitely some very hard moments while at Hogwarts, but also some very enjoyable ones. He wished for those now, but they were very far off behind him. He got to the window, mounted his broom, and took off. It was a wonderful sensation to be out flying. The icy night air lashed his face, pushing away all the uneasiness of the evening. He accelerated at maximum speed, enjoying the sensation of freedom. Very soon, all the London's lights were far away under him. He could see the Thames sliding sinuously in the middle of it. The vastness of the city always had the power to soothe him and put everything in a different perspective. All emotions don't matter how powerful and overwhelming they seem. They are nothing really if you look at them from so much above. But then, at one point, you must always get back down. Ginny was waiting for him in bed, reading a book. He felt better than he thought possible considering how the evening had started. He got to kiss her, but she pushed him away. Don't touch me! You are freezing! He laughed. Is this how you welcome your lovely husband? He answered, going to get ready for the night. She kept reading studiously. My lovely husband left the window open. It was colder inside than outside when I got back. He shouted an apology from the bathroom. So, how was he? He asked, slipping under the duvet close to her. Subdued, I dare say, turning the page of her book. We talked about Ron's plan, and we said goodbye. But it wasn't as usual. Nobody joked or laughed. No, even George. The fact that you were missing didn't improve the mood. Trust me, it would have been worse with me there, he said, starting to kiss her shoulder and going up to the neck. You have been inside Lily's room, she affirmed, keeping her eyes on the book. He stopped immediately and turned away from her. Why did she have to mention Lily? He was fine. For once he was all right, and now all the bad feelings were back again. How was he? Fun! I enjoyed myself immensely, he answered in angry irony. She didn't reply for a minute, and then she said, We will need to do something about our room. Ginny, are you punishing me because I didn't come tonight? He retorted, losing passions. I'm not punishing you. I'm just saying we cannot leave it as it is forever. Harry knew it, but he didn't want to think about it, and he was annoyed with Ginny to have mentioned it now. Why not? Is it not as if we need that room? We can even board it up and not think about it anymore. He heard Ginny shutting her book, and she turned off the light. You know that we cannot. We need to do it. It's not even a month, for God's sake. Just leave me be. He raised his voice, upset. Why all this hurry now? She was indeed punishing him. They didn't talk for a while, but he couldn't fall asleep. He was too vexed. He then felt Ginny's hand on his back. She sighed. I'm sorry, Harry. I was indeed punishing you, though not consciously. Harry didn't move, nor spoke. He wasn't softened. I just had a very desolate evening at my parents', and I took it out on you. I'm sorry. It was unfair. Ginny, you cannot do this. This is much worse than unfair. You can't use this to vent out your feelings. He didn't turn to face her. He felt resentment for how she behaved. He wasn't justified. He would never have done it. No? Really? Do I need to remind you what you did to her? I'm sure that was justified. The voice inside him disagreed apparently, and probably with some reason. But he still on his resentment. He still held on his resentment. There was silence for a while, and then he heard a crying sob. Why? And why women have to cry so much? And why I cannot just ignore it? He turned towards her as the anger subsided faster than it came, drove away by her tears, and took her in his arms consolingly. Come on, Ginny. Don't cry. It's all right. It wasn't easy for neither of them. He couldn't blame her too much. Even if just a sprinkle less of mood swings would have been appreciated by Harry. It was a few days already that she had been very temperamental. Harry was having some trouble in dealing with it, especially because it seemed he couldn't do anything right. Sometimes she was scolding him basically just for being alive, and a moment later she was all sweetness and tenderness. Or crying, like now. I'm awful, Harry. I'm so sorry. She wailed in tears, huddling up against him. You are not. It's also my fault. I could have been more sensitive, I guess. And then, to make her laugh, and maybe I could have closed the window behind me before leaving. She chuckled between tears. Yeah, that was pretty horrible of you. I almost froze to death. I've done it just to be able to warm you up now, he joked, keeping her close to him. She laughed softly and then went silent. Harry? Hmm? She didn't say anything for a while, but then she broke down again. Why did you have to happen to Lily? Why to our child? Harry sighed, a loss for word, a loss for words. He was asking himself the same question every day. I don't know, he answered, her shown grief mirroring his inside one. So that was the end of chapter 28. Marco, do they have any idea about how much money they could make by renting the spare room to students? Probably they don't. And probably they didn't think about it. But yeah, it could be a solution. I don't think they want to do it, especially because Harry Potter is a kind of the Brad Pitt of the magical community. So yeah, probably students would be very, very happy to be in the same house as him, but probably not that much. Harry. Enrique is coming to say hello, obviously. Okay, so I guess we can carry on with chapter 29. And we have a plot twist here. This is one of my favorite chapter. So let's see if Ricky will allow us to read. Hmm? Okay. Maybe we can do it. Chapter 29. I've got only Ginny left. In the following month, Harry started to get used to the house emptiness and silence, although every morning he had to compel himself to get up and go to work. Many times he felt like turning on the other side and lying in. Ginny, who had a more flexible job, often would do just that. After the first few days, where she had tried to be strong for Harry's sake, now she was falling in dejection. She was often sleeping. Sometimes Harry would leave her asleep in the morning and find her When he got back from work, still asleep. He would have a run, and when back, she was still asleep. He would prepare her some food, but she barely touched it, and then she would be asleep again. She wasn't eating much. She was pallid and frequently unwell. Harry was gaining back the weight she was losing. He would sit beside her, caressing her head, his heart closed in a grip. "What can I do to help you? Just tell me," he would ask her. But she was always either saying she was just tired or asking for triviality like water or things of that kind. Harry didn't know what to do anymore to keep up her spirit. He would spoil her and cuddle her and humor her, but nothing seemed to do any good. He felt inadequate and in defect. She had done so much just a few days before to sustain him, and now, then she needed the same support. He wasn't up to the task. He was striving but couldn't find a way to help her. She was sinking in a sea of sorrow, and he couldn't stretch his hand far enough to catch her. It was like living with a sense of continuous suffocation, as having something oppressing his chest and not being able to get rid of it. Only with an enormous effort he could keep going day after day, with no real prospect of an improvement in his mood. At work, he was busier than ever. Between his job and Hermione's handover, the guy was chosen in the end, thankfully, he didn't have a moment to breathe, which, all considering, they were the only uneasy free moments of his new life. People had started to behave normally toward him again, or at least as before the Christmas holidays. It was impossible to expect to be treated as anybody, but even if he didn't like it, he was used to being stared and pointed at by now. He was, under many aspects, an improvement against the commiseration looks and mourning tone. Hermione was often having dinner with them. Ron was thriving in Romania and seemed to be satisfied and in a better state of mind. Hugo, too, was getting used to the novelty, with Jon's help. She was relieved by this, and they managed to have some good time keeping each other company. She would sleep over time to time. It was melancholic for her to get back to an empty house, and they were glad to have her there. It was a distraction from their gloom. The last evening in England was spent with them. She was leaving early the next day. She had organized all the stop by flu powder to the custom houses of every country separating England from Romania, and the whole trip was going to last a few hours. Harry could see dejection in Hermione, but she made her best to hide it. Ginny was feeling well, and on the whole, they managed to have a cheerful dinner. When leave taking approached, Ginny hugged her tightly, asking her to write very often, which she promised. They had very much bonded since the Hogwarts days, and their friendship had grown steadily as years passed. Marrying Ron, she, as him, had become part of the Weasley family. Only a few months before, Ron and Hermione were the people they would hang out with. Only a few months before, Ron and Hermione were the people they would hang out with the most, sometime spending together even the summer holidays. Therefore, Ginny was saying farewell to one of her best friends. But for Harry, he was much more than that. He was losing a friend, a sister, a support, an advisor, his conscience. Hermione, together with Ron, had been his only family for many years, the people he cared most when he was a kid. And now there was only Ginny and his children, dearest to him. She had been short of a sister, a companion in his darkest hours, bearing all his ill humor. She had always believed in him, even when the world in general wouldn't. She had always helped him, even when against her better judgment. She had always trusted in him, even when he felt insecure. She had always comforted. him when he most needed to be comforted. And when they grew out of being kids to become adult, she had been his best listener, a person to whom he could confide what he wouldn't to Ginny, not to trouble her, and what he couldn't to Ron, because of his envy. When he was a boy, he had enjoyed more Ron's company. It was all about having a good time, joking around, and having trivial conversation. Although he didn't change growing up, he didn't develop with them. He was still what he was when they were kids. But Harry's needs from a friendship had changed, and Hermione, in time, had supplanted Ron in many aspects. He felt more at ease with her in talking about his marriage when there were some issues and asking her for advice of any kind. He knew he could always count on her for anything. She was always there for him whenever he needed. He was parting from somebody of the most important for him, the only friend he had left after losing Ron. He was aware that he would have seen her again and heard from her very often, but it was not going to be the same as having her every day close at hand. He could already envisage all the loneliness of the next month up to summer holidays. Who's going to tell me off when I'm doing something wrong? He joked sadly once they were about to say goodbye. They had walked in the park. It was desert at that hour, a safe spot to disapparate. Sorry, just a second. In the meanwhile, I'm going to read what you wrote. Cat. I'm late. Hello, Marta. Hello. Mark Weasley Cat technical support on the mic. He's the superstar. Yeah, he's the superstar. Thankfully, he decided to sit far away from me. Probably got bored of me moving around. No, he didn't got bored. Okay, I'm sorry. Now I'm chasing him away. Hopefully, he was staying by his side. Okay. No. Okay. When you have a cat, it's like that. You cannot decide anything. They decide and you need to obey. So let's find a solution. Okay. Okay. He was aware that he would have seen her again and heard from her very often. But it was not going to be the same as having her every day close at hand. He could already envisage all the loneliness of the next month up to summer holidays. Who's going to tell me off when I'm doing something wrong? He joked sadly once they were about to say goodbye. They had walked in the park. It was desert at that hour, a safe spot to disapparate. She laughed, but it wasn't a cheerful sound. It was a laugh hiding a sob. She was surely feeling all he was feeling. You will have to rely on yourself alone. I taught you well. I scarcely must tell you off nowadays. I'm proud of you, she said, patting his shoulder. Her hand lingered there, though, her wet eyes catching the little light coming from a crescent moon. Her lips slightly open, as if to say something, probably a goodbye, she hadn't the courage to utter. You should probably go now. You'll get cold, he said, pronouncing for her that farewell he thought she couldn't bring herself in giving. She couldn't answer. Words would have set off those tears that she was trying to keep back. She just stared at him for a few moments, a glance full of emotions, both sharing without words the pain of a separation after 24 hours of daily companionship. She laid both her hands on his shoulders, holding her eyes on his, and standing on tiptoe, she drew him toward her and let her mouth, that couldn't express itself in words, convey her feeling in a kiss. Harry was expecting it. He wasn't surprised by her approaching him. Probably, if she hadn't, he would have done it instead. They were exchanging kisses time to time to greet each other. It wasn't anything new nor disturbing. They were just friendly kisses like the one she was giving to Ginny. But this was not it, and he realized it right away. She kissed his lips, and that already in itself was bizarre. She had never done it before. They were usually kissing on cheeks, and moreover, it wasn't even a peck. It was a proper kiss, soft and dense of feelings. A kiss like many he had received from Ginny, and that alone. Perhaps Cho Chang in the past, but not even then. Harry was shocked and confused. Is this normal? He was afraid to mention it in case he was misunderstanding, and what she meant was indeed a friendly exchange. But it couldn't be. He had never seen friends behaving this way, and if Ginny was kissed in the same way by a male friend, he was sure he would have had a violent reaction. But then, he would have had the same even with a peck, so perhaps it didn't count. She still had her hands on his shoulders and was looking at him, steadily, without any trace of wrongdoing in her look. Hermione, what are you? He started saying, still undecided whether to speak his doubt. But she didn't let him finish. She dissolved his unfinished question, sliding her hands behind his neck and kissing him again. This time, passionately, trying to part his lips with her own. Okay, this is definitely wrong. The incertitude was gone. It was surely not a friendly kiss. He had to stop it straight away. He pushed her away from him, scared by by her incomprehensible behavior. Hermione, what the hell are you doing? She looked at him with round eyes. Her chin started to tremble as if about to cry. But Harry didn't want to see any tears. He had seen enough of them for a lifetime. He wanted an explanation. Don't even try to cry, Harry warned her sternly. What was that? She gulped 2 or 3 times, attempting to stop what was threatening to emerge any time since the beginning of their walk. Harry, I'm sorry, but I think I. I mean, don't say it, Harry entreated, understanding in a flash what she was about to declare in an urgent attempt to stop her. Love with you, she said. Harry was thunderstruck. His brain, in a frantic activity, rooted him on the spot. This is a joke, he said, as soon as he found his speech again, regretting to have asked her for an explanation that he now knew he was better not to receive. Hermione shook her head, biting her lips in great distress. Harry panicked. Hermione, this is an awful moment of our lives. We are all upset. This is just loneliness you are feeling. He wanted to reason with her, desperate to make her eat her words. They were still in time to pretend nothing ever happened. Harry, I've known to be in love with you for years, she said meekly, looking away from him. What? He exploded. For years? How many years? He asked aghast. He couldn't refrain himself in asking those questions of which he didn't want to hear the answers. Hermione started to fidget. I don't know. Many? I don't know, she said, shaking her head, confused, backing away, sensing him upset and scared of her own daring in declaring so much. Okay, I need to sit down, he said, overwhelmed, sitting on a bench not far off. He took off his hat and passed a head in his hair, trying to calm himself, and succeeding only in panicking more. He was getting worse and worse. This is not happening. This must be a joke. But Hermione was in front of him abashed, looking anywhere but him, her arms crossed and flinching. There was too much emotion under his eyes to be just a joke. It must have been the truth, and by the sound of it, it was something she had been harboring for a very long time. When did it start? Why? Did I do something I shouldn't have? No, you didn't do anything besides being yourself. She hesitated sheepishly, and then she resumed. It's my fault. Please, Harry, don't ask me specifically when, please, she implored him in agitation. It started a very long time ago, longer than you probably imagine. I'm ashamed to own how long it has been. I've always known it and never admitted, not even to myself, up to recently. Harry was bewildered. He tried again to reason with her. Hermione, you are married to Ron. You must love Ron. You have always loved Ron. She shook her head. No, Harry, I've known not to be in love with Ron for a very long time. I care for him, but the love is long gone. I loved him surely at first, but I was in love with you too after a time, and then only with you. She almost whispered the last few words. It was dark, but he could see the blushing on her cheeks, as if it were daytime. The bewilderment left Harry to be replaced by irritation and disappointment. This cannot be true. You cannot be in love with me. I'm hot tempered. I get angry very easily. I'm impulsive and I can be quite stupid at times. You said all of this yourself. You said that you would never have me. Those were your words. He yelled at her in a temper. She had lied for all these years. He felt deceived. One of his few relationships that thought genuine and real was crumbling under his eyes in an unstoppable avalanche. She started to fret more than ever. Harry, I know I've said it and I mean it all. I forced myself to be convinced of it. I reproach myself many times for this feeling. I've tried everything to suppress it. I promise you I did. But I just couldn't. And the tears that she was trying so hard to repress gushed finally from her eyes. I just couldn't, she repeated, pleading him with her expression to understand and forgive. This compelling infatuation she hadn't been able to kill. Harry was very upset by now. She was destroying one of his certainties. He had always believed in their fellowship, defending it when people affirmed that friendship between man and woman was impossible. Now, he found out that it was true, at least for them. Ginny was right. She's always right, for heaven's sake. From now on, I'll be submissive and I won't argue with her anymore because she's always right and I'm always wrong. And I will save myself a lot of troubles. I thought we were friends, he said, looking at her disappointed, hurt. Hermione's face was panic stricken. We are friends. I've always tried to be a friend to you. I tried to be selfless. It's only that you were looking at me and I knew that we wouldn't see each other for a very long time and I lost control. Her words were frantic. This is not friendship, Hermione. Harry sighed desolately. They had both nurtured a one-way sentiment in two different directions. He thought about all the time he hugged her, took her hands, kissed her, all the time she slept at their place, and even got advice on his marriage. While he was behaving with her as with a sister, she was actually wishing for him. Under this new light, all seemed disturbing and reckless. How is it possible I've never noticed anything? The answer was that he never even considered possible Hermione being in love with him. That's why he failed to notice. And because I'm a blind gay. He was certainly not excusable, but she had been much worse. How could she have allowed herself to play this dangerous game? She should have kept distance. Harry realized that probably she had fantasies over him, perhaps while she was with Ron, and that sickened him slightly. He had allowed her to form them with his inconsiderate behavior. What do you expect from me? He added disheartened. Why did you even have to tell? Did you think you had some hope or something? She looked away mortified, without replying. Oh my god, perhaps she did. This is all my fault. I'll never and never even look at another woman in the eyes again. He scolded himself. He had to suppress this without delay. He couldn't allow it to go any farther. There was just one remedy for this. He had to be ruthless. Okay, right. Let's deal with this as adults, he said, changing attitude. First of all, does anybody know about it? She shook her head. Good. It will stay that way. He started firmly and stood up, now resolute in his own purpose. And now for the worst. Hermione, for your own good, I'll be brutal. It is necessary, okay? She nodded weakly, almost crushing on herself, ready to get the blow. Harry sighed again. He was sorry for the pain he was about to inflict, but it was essential and unavoidable. He looked at her, straight into the eye, and with conviction, marking every sentence severely, he said, I'm not in love with you. I will never be. Never. You have been a friend to me and nothing else. I love Ginny and her alone. There are no possible chances, not even in a million years, that I will break up with her for you and not even cheat on her. There can be nothing between us if not friendship. And right now, until this nonsense is over, not even that. I'm not going to write to you, and you are not going to write to me until you are over it. And this summer, if you are in England, you will find excuses to see me as little as possible. Is that understood? He was like stabbing her with every never and nothing, but he wanted his meaning to be clear without any possible misinterpretation. She nodded, her expression heartbroken. After a few moments, she started to sob uncontrollably. Normally, Harry would have hugged her. In a different situation, it would have been impossible for him to witness her anguish and not comforting her. But the shock of the revelation helped him to refrain in doing so. Now that she knew how she felt, he couldn't allow himself not even the smallest sign of tenderness. He just made her sit down, and then he waited for her to stop crying. He didn't trust in offering even an armchair. When tears subsided, he said sternly, Now you go home. And tomorrow, when you get there, you will write to Ginny. You will pretend nothing happened and everything is fine. All right? She nodded again, mopping up her tears with her sleeve. Okay, I'll wait for you to disapparate. And he added, And you should probably revise your marriage. Ron doesn't deserve this. And strange as it was, he meant it. He felt sorry for Ron. With all his faults, he was a good man and deserved a wife that loved him. Hermione stood up and looked at him as if wanting to add something. But Harry didn't want to hear anything she had to say. Nothing she could add would have mended what she had just broken. Hermione, just go, please, he urged her. She flinched, hurt by this parting coldness, and with a last look of longing and regret, she took the step that separated them irreversibly. New lesson. I have to mistrust and always be on my guard against any female human being but Ginny and. Let's rephrase it. I've got only Ginny left. Okay, and that was the end of chapter 29. Let me see what you have written. Harry was never a particularly bright child. Yeah, okay, this is definitely wrong. No joke genius. Oh yeah, Marta. Yeah, he can be actually quite kind of stupid. It was never very quick, never very quick. Mark, is there any magical society where you can just have two wives? No need to be so rude to poor Hermie. That could be a good idea. And also put the bad red guy in Azkaban where he belongs. Oh my gosh, that was nasty, Marco. Poor Ron. It doesn't deserve it. It's not that bad. And I don't think that Harry with Ginny and Hermione as wives would be very, very happy. Quite the opposite, I imagine. They are both kind of bossy and I don't know, with a very strong character. I think that is not a good deal for Harry. Not even if he could. I don't think he'd want to anyway. But he had to be rude anyway. He had to be clear about his sentiments toward her because otherwise there is always space for misinterpretation when a person is in love. So yeah, after this plot twist that I think it was very obvious. I mean, it was obvious that Hermione at one point would fell in love with Harry, considering that he didn't get any kind of I don't know, attention of tenderness from Ron after this obvious event. We can carry on with chapter 30, which is the last one of the evening. I'm just gonna drink a bit. And yeah, oh, let's keep going. Chapter 30. Tricked like a fool. Harry was having problems in believing what had just passed. He was so surreal. He felt enraged against himself for having allowed this to go unnoticed for so many years. He had to be more guarded. Ginny was right. Hermione was in a delicate situation, and despite Harry always considered her no more than a sister, she was a woman with feelings and desires. He had to be more careful. Now, however, it was too late, and Hermione couldn't be more lost to him than she was now. He remembered what he told Ginny not so long ago about the possibility of having sex with Hermione. He could have done it without love, just for fun, but he could never have kissed her in the way she kissed him. He was too intimate. There were too many feelings behind that kiss that shouldn't have been there at all. Hermione's feelings were stronger and deeper than Harry thought possible, and there was nothing else to be done but to keep her far from him. He was relieved now that they took the decision to move away. It made things easier. He hadn't been a good friend to them. He had repaid their loyalty and sustained by estrangement. They would have been much happier in their life without him. There was a cloud of misery following him since he was born, and all the people connected to him were infected by it sooner or later. When he got home, Ginny had fallen asleep on the sofa waiting for him. She woke up when he kissed her. You have been away long, she said, yawning. Not very long, sitting close to her. How was he? All right. We just said goodbye. He lied. How are you? She asked, cuddling close to him. Actually, I feel doomed for misery, he answered, enveloping her in his arms. Very soon you will abandon me. My sons will become dark wizards, and I will have no choice but to chuck them in Azkaban, and I will die alone, friendless, and miserable. Hmm, I see we are in a good mood, she replied. Nothing of what you said is going to happen, I'm sure. And it is not as you will never see Hermione again. It's only until summer. Yeah, right. I thought to invite Ted over tomorrow since it's Sunday. What do you think? She asked, yawning again. Good idea. You could ask him for some advice for your weakness, he answered. But by the end of the sentence, she was already sleeping. The next morning, The desire to be out running was stronger than ever. The necessity of making order in his head essential. The evening before was still in his mind. It had been a strong blow, and it costed him to keep it secret from Ginny. But it was for the better. He didn't even want to imagine a reaction in finding out. Nothing good could come out of it. It was unfair that because his friendship with Hermione was ruined, theirs should end too. In time, for sure, she was bound to realize something, especially in summer, both if they were going to meet or if they didn't. But there wasn't any point in worrying about it now. For a moment, he indulged himself in the idea that Hermione could realize to have been wrong. But even if that was the case, Harry knew very well that he couldn't be back to what had been. There could no longer be the same carelessness. He would have always felt restrained in his behavior towards her. Now, his eyes were open to the fact that she was a woman, and therefore she was to be kept at distance like all the other women. He couldn't be helped. He ran to Primrose Hill and stopped there to enjoy the sight. Days were starting to get longer, and in a few weeks, spring would be upon them. They had received that morning a letter from the boys, all eager for summer holidays to come. He had read it to Ginny while she was in bed, and it had a wonderful effect on her. A smile had appeared on her face. She had got up straight after it, went to the kitchen, and started to plan an elaborate lunch for Ted. He had left her there, cheerful and busy, and his heart lightened. Their happiness was linked inextricably. A smile from her was a guarantee of a smile from him. When he got back, he could hear fast talking coming from the kitchen. Ted must have arrived while he was out. "I'm home," he shouted. The talking stopped abruptly. It's never a good sign when that happens. In the kitchen, he found Ted sitting at the table with a cup of tea, and Ginny was standing, her expression troubled. As soon as she saw him, she smiled, but it wasn't a genuine smile. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing," Ginny answered, a bit too hastily. "If you want to take a shower, I'll prepare some lunch." "What's wrong?" he asked again, darkening. "Nothing, Harry," Ted interjected. "I just advised Ginny to go to some mango to get a potion since she's not feeling that well, and she got worried." And turning to Ginny, "But you have no reason to. Considering the situation, it's probably just the mood that influences your body." She looked back at Ted, widening her eyes slightly, and then she nodded slowly. Harry lightened. "I agree. But go and ask them for a potion anyway. It's been weeks already you are feeling down." They had a pleasant lunch, despite Harry couldn't fail to notice how little Ginny ate. They chatted about Ted's training. In a few moments, he had to choose his specialization. "I'm thinking to go for the minefield. Hermione gave me some muggle books about it, and I think we have a lot to learn from them. They have a proper role, psych or something, to treat the mind, which is not about potion makings at all. It sounds really interesting." Harry felt a bit uneasy at the mention of Hermione's name, but tried not to show. "I couldn't think of anything more appropriate than that. You'll do great," he remarked, owning that, probably, all that could be learned from those books he had already mastered from the age of 3. "Did you ever meet any of those psycho thingies while you were living with your uncle and aunt?" he asked eager. Harry could almost hear his uncle speaking. "Bunch of time and money wasters. They should be forced to get a proper job." Uh, no, not really. But I'm sure it's an interesting profession." After a slice of apple tart as a dessert, Ginny excused herself to go and take a nap. "You'll tidy up here, will you?" she asked Harry while leaving the kitchen. Harry started to collect empty dishes, sensing Ted's eyes on him. How was Hermione's farewell? He asked eventually. Harry had no intention whatsoever to tell Ted the truth. Nobody ought to find out. Although he was wary, as he had always the impression that Ted could read his mind. Fine, he just said. We had dinner here, and we took a walk. She must be there by now. Ted was silent for a moment, but then said abruptly, I know what happened. Harry, who was carrying some glasses to the sink, let them drop in surprise. They shattered in thousands of pieces on the kitchen floor. He cursed and, taking his wand to repair the damage, eased between his teeth in Ted's direction. How can you possibly know? Ted's hair became bright purple as his mouth fell open. Harry, I was just testing you. Did something really happen? Treat like a fool. Is everything fine down there? They heard Ginny calling from upstairs. Yeah, I just broke a glass, Harry answered back, closing the kitchen door. He marched straight to the sink, mumbling furiously under his voice. You young ones have no respect for adults. You should see me as a father and be deferential. Ted laughed heartily at this affirmation. It's a bit too late to start to be the father after years and years of allowing me to mess around. Let's say that you have been a better older brother. Bill was more the father. So, what happened? He pressed the matter with a smug smile that really irked Harry, embarrassed in having been tricked so easily. Scroogify, he muttered to clean dirty dishes, and started to put them away. If you asked, it's because you had a suspicion, he said, closing the kitchen cupboard with more force than necessary. Yeah, I did, Ted admitted frankly. Then you already know, Harry concluded sternly. She made a move. Harry let himself fall on the chair, close to him. Am I really so blind? Did the whole world notice but me? No, I don't think so, Ted said, comforting. I don't think anybody noticed anything. I just happened to catch a look or two on her face that made me suspect something. But on the whole, I would say she was quite guarded. Harry felt, Harry felt relieved for a second, but then he took his head between his hands in discomfort. I'm an idiot, nevertheless. I should have realized. You are not an idiot, Ted said, sympathetic. You are just very naive with women, that's all. I know, Harry said, exasperated. The thing is, I never even considered Hermione as a woman. She has always been just Hermione. Ted smiled cheekily. Yet you slept with her. Harry rose from his chair outraged. I'd never. However, remembering what had happened 19 years previously, he collapsed on it again. Yeah, actually, now that I think of it, I did. But we were young, younger than you are now. She wasn't in love with me then. Of that, I'm sure. And after a moment of consideration, or maybe she was. Who knows? I'm not sure about anything anymore. Tomorrow I will wake up and I'll find out that I was the evil one and Voldemort had been the good guy all along. Ted chuckled. I thought it was recent. I thought that's why she fell for you. Ted, of all people, was the only one to whom the mention of Voldemort's name didn't provoke any kind of reaction. Harry often wondered why. He had never asked in putting it to one of his many oddities, but perhaps it was because he was seeing him on a more human level instead of the representation of evil that he was for the rest of the magical community. Are you mental? He continued. Of course not. Ginny would have cut my throat and dumped my body in a ditch finding out something like that. I guess she fell for me because I was too caring and she was lacking affection, he admitted, dejected. But at the same time, he remembered what Ginny had said about women feeling involved after sex. Maybe the damage had been done there. Yeah, you were always hugging her. I don't know if it was wise considering Ron was never doing it. Are you rubbing it in? Harry glared. Then, after a moment, he asked downhearted, is friendship between men and women so impossible? Ted took some time to answer while rocking on the chair. I'd like to think not, but surely it is not easy. There is always going to be some portion of attraction from one side or the other. In your case, you always had this quite fragile triangle, Ron, Hermione, Harry, he said, scratching his chin, pondering. It was bound to collapse sooner or later. Ron was too jealous of you, and Hermione too needy of affection that she couldn't get from him. And the fact that you slept with her, even despite it was so long ago, shattered it. Although he had a second thought. Yeah, most probably it would have happened anyway. The real mistake was Hermione's and Ron. They should have never got together. They clearly aren't suitable. Harry acknowledged Jesus right, and he felt good for once not to have to feel all the blame. Do you think she's really in love with me? He asked, curious to know Ted's opinion. Difficult to say, he answered. Perhaps not. Perhaps you and Ginny represent what she would like in a relationship. As a couple, you wouldn't last 2 hours anyway. But you will agree with me that right now, it doesn't make much of a difference. Yeah, he assented, standing and going to the window. I'm glad they are there and not here. There was silence for some time, both lost in their reflections. Then Ted, with a look of concern, asked Harry, how are you and Ginny doing? Harry knew what he meant. He shook his head, looking outside the window. No, well, Ginny is always sick and tired, and I'm doing my best, but all of this is crushing me. I cannot see any light at the end of the tunnel. It's a bit like having a dementor always close by. I feel like I will never be happy again. Ted didn't answer, somber, his hair turning a pale blue together with his eyes. He stood up and joined him to the window, looking outside to the cloudy day. Harry, can I ask you something since you mentioned the mentors? He, he asked slowly, frowning. Go ahead, he answered, thinking how appropriate was this analogy with those monstrous creatures. The feeling he and Ginny were experiencing was so similar to the one he had endured many times in his youth. That crippling mind constriction that robbed one of every hope of future well being. What's the shape of your Patronus? Ted asked him, shifting his glance from the outside to him. It's a stag. It has always been a stag. When was the last time you produced one? Harry shrugged. I don't know. Many years ago, I suppose. Why? Ted walked about the room. He halted in front of the shelf with the family pictures. He stared at them, pondering, and noticing Luna's stone, he grabbed it. He started to play with it, moving from one end to the other. And then, smiling, he swiftly threw it toward Harry, who caught it easily. Dunno. Maybe you should try to cast one again in a few days, just to see what happens. You might be able to chase your Dementor away. As he said, his hair turned green as a lush countryside landscape, and the stone picked exactly the same shade. And that was the end of chapter 30. So, Marco wrote, can't believe Eric was the clever hero of 7 books. Yeah, can't believe it either. But nobody ever said that he was clever. just he was the hero of the seven books. And that makes all the difference. He was just a hero by a coincidence, not by merit. Let's say that. Not that he didn't have some virtues, it happened to be the hero just because Voldemort chose him. Okay, so we concluded our reading for tonight. Yeah, Marta. Hermione was the smart one there. Yeah. Thanks for Hermione. I was chatting with a friend like a few days ago, and we were saying, what would he happen if Harry followed Hermione's advice all the time she gave some? And we agreed that probably we wouldn't have gone over the third book, maybe the fourth. We wouldn't have had seven books anyway. All the things would have been solved much sooner if Harry would have listened to Hermione a bit more often. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, we had our reading for tonight. It was quite long. Those chapters were very long, but as I said, the next week we are gonna to have just two, and they're very brief. And the book one is gonna be finished, and we will start straight after it with the second one. Still didn't decide if I'm gonna get 1 week break or not. Let's see how I will feel. But anyway, I thank you very much to have been here. Thank you a lot, and I wish you a good night. And I hope to see you the next week. So, Marco, if Hermione was clever, she would be tougher with the handsome Siberian mage of the other school. But we don't really know what happened there. Maybe she had been tougher. Good night, Marta. Good night, Marco. See you next week, I hope.